Well, hey, friends. Welcome to the Everyday Mulemanship podcast. I'm Ty Evans, and today I got my old pal Daniel Dauphin with me, all the way from Louisiana. So, Daniel, thanks for jumping on here last minute, bud. I appreciate you.
Absolutely my pleasure, man. We always have a good time when we get together, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, heck yeah. So, just real briefly, maybe you could uh, tell my listeners what you do for a living, and you got a cool little niche in the horsemanship world, and I know all about that. Being the mule guy, I'm the mule guy. You're the bit guy. So uh, I'd like you to maybe give them the overview of what you do and what you got going in your family and everything. Let's start there, bud.
Okay. Well, as far as family goes, I've been married. We're fixing to have our 20th anniversary here in a couple of months. Red-headed wife, so it keeps my ego in check all the time. Kind of like being a mule guy, right? You can't get too big out there, or they're going to humble you right away, right? So, I have two sons. One is starting his second year of college, and the other is 13. So we're in complicated aspects of life currently with them. Um, as far as the horse world goes, I started off in cutting horses. I used to be a futurity 2-year-old guy. I did that for a long, long time. Um, had a few sort of life moments that put me on the clinician path. Transition from teaching mostly horses to teaching mostly people a little over a decade ago. And I thought when I did that, I didn't have any name recognition or credibility in that world, so I'd do a few YouTube videos, and that'd kind of be my bona fides. If someone wanted to know whether I knew what I was talking about or not, I'd point them that way. And I chose bits just sort of randomly, and those videos actually hit and did really really well, and so I kind of doubled down on it and figured I would follow what the public wanted me to tell them about, and now I'm the bit guy. So
The bit guy.
although I still do clinics for horsemanship and all that kind of stuff too, but the niche is the bit thing for sure.
Well, and you've done an awesome job diving into that area of knowledge, man. Like I've been just surfing around checking your stuff out, and it's really cool. It's really cool how deep you've went in that, because there's just so much stuff that people don't know about bits and the function and what they think works and what they think doesn't work and what they think, you know, you hear this word in the bit world, harsh or severe. Seems like those two words come up a lot, or mild, people using these words, but um, and then you hear the cliche sayings like, well, it's not the bit, it's the hands, you know, and all that stuff. And yeah, you're like, okay, it seems like in the bit world, there's just a whole bunch of partial truths and a whole bunch of s- misunderstandings. And anyways, I appreciate what you do, Daniel, diving into that and offering your education there. You got some really cool stuff going on. So, but
Well, thank you.
I don't think you did it by random. I want to dive deeper because I don't think you just randomly picked bits. Like, there's no way. You had to have like either a moment of annoyance that you're like, okay, we got to talk about this, or there must have been some point where you're like, we gotta learn more. We need to teach more. Something happened.
Well, so I often tell people I lost a bet, and that's how I get here. Because like bets is the topic nobody wants to learn about. They either think they know enough, and I got it, I don't need any more here, or it's too mystified. I don't even. It's too big of a. I don't want to even start this journey. Like I'll just tell me to use this one, and I'll use that one, and so that's kind of the battle that we have. So one thing I omitted from my past is that I actually started college in mechanical engineering. So I have a pretty strong background in physics and that sort of stuff. And like you said, with that background, you hear these statements made all the time, and like my antenna perk up. I'm like, what? That's not right. That's not how that went. And you kind of you hear that 1,000 times, and you're like, okay, like we need to clear this up. That's because there is information that if people don't know better and they believe the misinformation, bad information, false information, however you want to label it, like you can do harm. I mean, like we're communicating with a very 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 sensitive part of the horse. And an awful lot of the time when people come to me with bit problems, it's simply that the horse is overloaded. The person essentially is too loud about everything they do. And that horse is figuratively like putting their hooves over their ears, just like I got to tone this down. Like I can't take this anymore, you know? And that's when a lot of the problems start. So to me, the only solution to that is education. It's kind of presenting my case, and here's the logic of it. And I think when I do that, I'm pretty hard to argue with. Like it's a pretty well laid out, pretty deep case, and so hopefully most people have been very receptive to it. You get that occasional person that just says, "Oh, you're an idiot," and doesn't want to listen. But that's I don't think there's any aspect of life that's exempt from that. So uh, we just keep teaching and plowing on, and hopefully making a difference in some horses and some people's lives. Or I know we are. I mean, it's not hopeful. That's what
Yeah.
we're hoping to do. But I know we're having the effect. So slowly but
No,
surely,
you're,
we're gaining more and more traction and getting in front of more and more people. And so,
oh yeah, you're doing it, man. You're doing great. What I really appreciate about you, Daniel, is like you're, and now that you say you got your background in mechanical engineering, things make a lot more sense, of how you think for sure. I'm like, oh, okay, that's why. All right, that's why he talks the way he does. It's not just because he's from Louisiana. Uh, no, like, I'm in your Facebook group, your Bits, Spurs, and Good Sense group, and I love it how active you are on there and answering questions. But somebody will throw a picture of a bid on there and ask about it. And what I love that you do is you're just factual about it. You leave emotion out, at least maybe your final draft of your post is. I don't know how many times you click delete, Daniel. I can't, I don't know. I'm sure maybe you click delete a few times, but your final draft of your comments is always fact based. You're like, okay, well, let's look at this bit. Let's leave emotion out of it. This is how the bit functions. This is where pressure is being applied. This is where signal turns into leverage. This is where, and you just lay it out like that. And I think a lot of people need to take emotion out of these tools at times and say, okay, well, what are the facts here? Because um, I get you know me, I'm a bridleman, so I'm making bridle mules and horses, and so I get all kinds of comments and questions about my half breed bits and about my spade bits, and clearly the people are emotional about it. They'll see a spade and they go, oh my gosh, and I'll use. I found a video you was doing of a bunch of bloopers and a bunch of things you put together, and you were taking you had drawings of the bits. You know what I'm talking about? You had drawings of the bits up on this poster board, and you're talking about snaffle, and you point up to the spade bit, and you're like, "Oh, okay, folks, get your helmets for this." You know? And you just killed me. Uh, but it's that emotion that gets in people's way of education, not just bits of everything. When you let that emotion, your first impression of things. Um, and to me, tools are important, right? Tools of the trade are important, and the process that I go through. I'm starting them in snaffle bits, and I'm going to the hackamore, and I'm going to the two rein into the bridle. It's a very particular process, and it's not for everybody. And I and honestly, I don't want everybody to do it because then it wouldn't be as cool as I think it is. you know, but the it's understanding the tools of the trade. So when somebody comes up to me and asks me, "Hey, what bit should I use on this horse or on this mule?" It's not just cut and dry for me to answer that. It's has to do for me with the progressions of their education, and also that individual animal. And I just love how you lay things out so factually. So I appreciate what you're doing with that. Um, so I got my first controversial question for you, and I'm so excited because you're so good at these. Um,
okay.
what is the question you get the most that um, that you see the most misunderstanding of bits? And we're just generalizing bits across the board. We're not picking on any bits yet. But what's the question that you get that you're like, oh my gosh, you know, we just don't understand?
I think there's a few ways I could go with this. I think probably the most common one is the nutcracker effect stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and that really, to me, that is, I don't really know where it started. I have a pretty strong suspicion, but to me, it's marketing genius. It's total BS. But if you are selling bits and you can invent a mythical problem to solve and make people believe that it's a real problem, I mean, that's a heck of a tool to sell bits, you know.
Yeah.
And I kind of seem at odds sometimes with the bit makers. I'm really not. I mean, at the end of the day, they're trying to sell bits, and I don't have anything against people buying bits, but I do want you to make an educated, good choice on stuff and buy them based upon reality, not upon myth, you know.
Yeah.
So like the nutcracker effect, I this would be hard to just do verbally. I like to draw on a whiteboard where I can show all of the stuff and everything. But with snaffle bits, the nutcracker effect is absolutely mechanically impossible. Every single aspect of it is easily debunkable. Um, and so that would probably be the most common thing. I even have people that I know have been following me for a few years, and then I'll see them make a comment in the bit group about the nutcracker effect, and I'm just like, I'm
What do you
failing
mean?
y'all here. You're not paying attention, right? Because you know,
Yeah.
but I
I
even like to use like the single jointed snaffle is the one that always gets the flag for that, right? So in my
Mhm.
presentations, I have we would call it a pecan cracker or a crab claw cracker, and it is actually double jointed. And so I love to put that up and say, here is an actual nutcracker. And notice it's not a single jointed apparatus, it's a double jointed apparatus. And so just every aspect of what you hear in that nutcracker thing is pretty much quasi science. It's not actual, you know, the way the mechanics actually
Oh
does
yeah.
play out and work. So
I hear that all the time too, Daniel. And I got a mule skull that was donated to me by a young lady that you know her childhood mule had passed away, and she wanted this mule to go on and keep educating. So she gave me the skull. So when I do these little presentations, I got this skull. His name is Phineas. We call him Phineas Bones, and he's dead broke. Anyways,
the keeper too. Huh?
it's a bet. Yeah, he's a keeper. Uh, yeah. So I'll put a snaffle bit on like that, you know. And he always takes the bit so good. He's a good boy. You know, he just opens that mouth right up. But, you know, people ask about this nutcracker thing. I'm like, okay, look, I'm gonna and this is a just a skull, you know, that you guys there's no flesh on it. It's just a skull. And so and I'll pull that snaffle bit back as if they're, you know, trying to do that nutcracker. I'm like, look, it's physically impossible. We can't get it narrow enough to actually do what you're talking about here. And then I always love to say, you know, P.S. That's not how you should be using your reins. Let's just say, even if it was physically possible, you're using your reins wrong. You're riding wrong. And I'll just say that you're just not riding right. So yeah, that's one I hear too a lot for dang
Yeah.
sure. So, um, What's your what is your thought on those double jointed snaffle bits? You had made a comment to in your group somewhere explaining those you know the double jointed or the three-piece snaffle bits, and you made a comment about how those joints hit the bars of uh of that mouth, and because a lot of people think that double jointed deal is, oh well, it wraps around the mouth milder and blah blah blah, all these things, and you said, well, yeah, but you're taking those joints right over the bars of the mouth there, the jaws right there, and I think a lot of people don't understand these mechanics of things. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I do want to say here before what I'm about to say that it is just a tool, and so it's no more, no less. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. It has its applications, and it's the right tool sometimes for the right job. I will say that probably 80% of the time that people come to me with bit problems, double jointed snaffle is what is in the horse's mouth, and so it has a pretty high correlation with that stuff. to me. I'm also what I'm about to say is going to be a little controversial in your world, so nobody lose their hat quite yet. Let me finish talking about it. But double jointed snaffles are predominantly tongue pressure bits, and a lot of like your spade bits and all are going to be straight bar bits. They're predominantly tongue pressure bits as well. The tongue is one of the most sensitive parts of the entire horse. It's the only part of the horse involved in three of the five senses. All mammals are have to be born with the sucking and swallowing reflex. So even puppies and kittens that are blind and deaf for 3 weeks, their tongue and palate and suction and all of that has to function right from the get go. And in fact, you're a dad, I'm a dad. Whenever you're raising kids, they get to that point where they're crawling and not quite walking 9 months to a year. And the most common thing you say to them is, don't put that in your mouth. And that is because the tongue and the palate are so sensory at that stage of development, their hands and eyes are not as developed as their tongue is. And so if they want to know what this object is, they put it in their mouth and they get more data as to what this is in their mouth than they would with their hands or their eyes. And so when we think of all of that and how sensory and communicative the tongue is very easy to overload. So kind of like what I was saying earlier, when it's like they want to put their hooves over their ears and just, you know, they need to put you on mute for a little while. So for a higher level horseman, the tongue is where you want to be because it is all about subtlety and sensitivity. But if you are as handsy as the quarterback on prom night, then you're going to overload that horse's tongue or mule's tongue real
Yeah.
quick. And they're just going to kind of have all that they have. And in fact, like one of the most common things we'll see is withdrawal of the tongue, or the horse puts their tongue or mule puts their tongue over the bit. That's actually a defense mechanism. They are putting you on the bars, which are not neurologically complex. They have essentially just put you on mute because you're too loud for the tongue. And so anytime we're riding with a bit that is a tongue pressure bit, we need to be pretty aware that sensory overload is on the menu. And so if you don't respect that, you're not aware of it, and you're not really looking for signs of it, or when you need to back off and so forth, then you can make things get pretty sour and pretty ugly pretty quickly there. And there's a lot of times, I'm sure you've seen this with some people too, that like the horse will be fine for the first 20 or 30 minutes of the ride, but 30 minutes, 45 minutes in, we start to see the foamy mouth. Now they're getting a little finickier. Now they're pushing on the rider's hands. They're bobbing their head. All these little things start creeping up. Those are the signs. That is, you have pulled on me as long as I can stand for you to pull on me. I got to get some relief now. And so that's probably the most common scenario that I run across. And not surprisingly, the bit that's a tongue pressure bit that people tend to want to ride with two reins and contact and think that they can go for an hour straight with contact the whole time. It just fries them. They just can't take that.
Oh man. Yeah. Yeah, I see a lot of that too. I see a lot of that too. Well, and part of the just a personal annoyance, like with those double jointed snaffles is I like to learn about the history, like why bits were made, because it helps put some perspective into the thought that went into like the mechanical part of using this. Why, why do we do this? Why did we invent this? What was the mindset of inventing this? And and you said it's the contact. It's like, all right, well, I want to be able to I want to be able to have this contact the whole time, and not get the reactions that maybe a different type of a bit would. And again, it kind of goes back to what I said. It's like, all right, well, we're using these tools wrong. You got to understand how they work, and then you got to actually use the tool. If I take my carpenter's, hammer, and I'm doing finish work on cabinetry, we're gonna make a mess here. Um, and I think that's really important. Um, you've Man, we got some. There's so many fun things to ask you about here. I'm just gonna throw one hard at you, Daniel, because I just love your responses, and you guys listening, listen closely to all his funny little remarks, like about that quarterback. This guy's full of it. Um, but Daniel, so in my line of work, there is a particular bit or gadget, whatever. I don't know exactly what to call it, but that is, I guess I would say my nemesis. It contradicts everything I'm trying to do. There's a bit. It's called a Myler combination bit, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's got a nose band. It's got a shank on it. There's different levels people can attach reins to the shank for different signals, whatever, right? And when somebody comes to ride with me, the style of riding that I'm helping them with, and the horsemanship that I teach, that pretty much contradicts everything I'm going to do. You know, there's just when you pick up on that bit, for example, you put some pressure on both reins. You know, it's got a little gag on it, so you're getting the gag, you're getting the shank, you're getting the curb, and the curb is higher, and it's a chain. It's higher up on that jaw, and then you got a nose band that contacts at the same time, and the nose band is designed to hang low on the cartilage area. And then because of the function of it, we call it the brain crusher, you know, when it gets tighter on the pole, right? So and the argument that I get from riders all the time is like, well, I only have to do a little bit, and I get a lot of signal here. And they use the word signal, and I say, well, and I'd love your take on this because you can explain it way better than me, Daniel. But to me, there's a fine line from the signal to the leverage. You know, as soon as we're making contact, the signal's been sent. It's now the signal is much higher, which translates to me to leverage. Now we're putting some real pressure on to get these results. And anyways, in my little mule world, Daniel, that's the bit that just when somebody shows up with it, and it's very common. Um, it just I'm like the things I'm teaching you, we can't even do it. Like, you know, because maybe somebody wants to work on a leg yield, right? And they want to get
Hmm.
you know, get a little bend. You're going to bend them a little bit to the left, to leg yield to the right, and you know they can't even put a correct signal on with this gadget to get that bend. Instantly, the mule throws its head up, and it's just got so much going on. So that's my little nemesis in my world, Daniel. What is yours in your world? Do you got one?
So yeah, so I would call that a gimmick sort of a thing, and I'm right there with you on it. My most hated deal, and it would have a lot in common with this, is actually a mechanical hackamore.
Yeah, yeah,
I think the best use for them is to weigh down a trot line so that your bait gets nice and low on the bottom where the catfish are. I think that's probably the best use for them. Um, so let me just break this down a little bit. Like, I've been exploring this a lot lately, and when people think of like contact, we would picture this rider going around on a horse or a mule, and the horse or mule is kind of on the vertical, and the rider has two reins tight, right? And yeah, as you well know, 'cause you're a fine horseman or muleman, um, there's a lot of times when we look at the goal, but we don't necessarily understand the steps that go into getting to that goal. Like people want to start with the goal.
yeah,
Contact actually begins with one rein at a time, not two. And if you don't have good single rein contact and you're not actually thinking of it that way, then you don't have anything to back up to in two rein contact. And so that's a big principle that I try to bring people back to all the time is one rein at a time, true lateral flexion through the pole in the horse or the mule, and so forth. And so, like the device that you were just talking about, if we're going to kind of crunch down on one half of the mule or horse's face, or with the mechanical hackamore, you're doing the same thing. It's not a terribly lateral device. And most of the time, when you see people using something like that, they're doing it because they need air quotes more control, right? They feel like they might get run away with or bolted off or something like that, and they need something big enough to stop this. And the reality is the solution to those problems is the one rein at a time stuff. And so you have the worst tool on the animal that you could have for the actual problem and way that you need to solve it. And so that's kind of the way look at it. It does get more complex than that. Like I'll also say, I have done a lot of studying and research in this aspect. One of the most important things to happen for the horse in order for them to stay relaxed and calm and process and release tension is that they continue to swallow while you're riding them. And so anything that's going to really clamp that jaw shut is going to tend to tense them up in that area and actually prevent them from swallowing. So really and truly, if you grab them with that thing, it's a guaranteed fight or flight response. You shut down their brain and all of the ability for them to learn and relax. And so they can't process and consciously work through it. So it just really, like, there's nothing wrong with a hammer as a tool, but a hammer is not the right tool in every situation. And so that as a tool, it's as poor a choice as you could possibly make for what the actual problems are that are going on with the animal in those situations. And so that's the thing for me. It's not that they can't be ridden successfully, but most of the time when people think it's the solution to the problem, it is anything but.
So I got a horsemanship and a bit question combined for you now. God, I'd love to hear your take on this because I know you address this a lot. So, okay, you mentioned it. The person that's using this device, they're doing it because they feel like they need more control, which means that they feel like they don't have control in something else, right? And we're dealing with a confidence issue. So, how do we talk to this person? How do we educate them on the use of these things and be able to convince them of what you just said? Hey, you know what? I know that when that horse spooks on you, and it will, and I get it, and it takes off or whatever it does, um, and I know that person believes that they should be pulling back on two reins like they see on TV, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's how they do it on Yellowstone. Why can't we do it here? It's how, so, uh, but how can we help that person, in their mindset? And I guess we're going to have to talk them into this lateral business, Daniel. We're going to have to talk them into it. So how are you talking in your students into this stuff? Like, what are you going to say to them?
It depends on the scenario. I mean, like some horses or mules, you legitimately do have something to be concerned with here, right? Like this animal really could get out of control and hurt you. Sometimes I'm sure you've seen, like I have, sometimes they're sitting on a cream puff and they just don't know it. They think they're sitting on a dragon. And so sometimes we have to kind of really introduce them to the real animal that they're riding. Maybe say, hey, look, just trust me. We're going to put you in this round pen and I'm going to flag you around. And your job is to hold slack in the reins. And I want you to grip the saddle horn with a death grip, but don't pick up on the reins at all. And then I'll flag them and get the mule squirting off a little bit. And then it slows down. And then I try to go like, oh my God, are you okay? And just make humor out of the situation. Like nothing actually happened here. Do you see that the worst case scenario you can envision is actually nothing? It's not a big deal. I try to use the humor a lot. I actually keep a little list on my phone. I call them amygdala hijack questions. So if you're following any of the brain stuff now, that the amygdala is where the fear center of the brain, where all the emotional override takes place and everything. And so I always have a couple of jokes up my sleeve that'll kind of shock them. It's like the cold bucket of water in the face sort of thing. So when they get into that side of their brain and they're totally taken over, I try to have a tool that'll snap them out of it and kind of bring them back over here. And usually once you've done that a couple of times with somebody, they can kind of regulate themselves a little bit better and start to see that it's not that big of a deal. Um, and then again, if we have a situation where I think the animal is pretty safe, then I may do the round pin stuff and really flag them around in there quite a bit and let them essentially have their first bridleless ride where I'm going to control the animal and you're just going to sit up there and we're going to change rate and all those things. And now I'm going to start introducing your legs and asking you to do this. And now that you've trotted in the round pen a figure eight without picking your hands up on this mule, and you've now sat down in the saddle and they stopped right there with you and they did all these things without the bridle. Now maybe you see that the bridle's just a little add on. It's not like the whole enchilada. And even if you are 80% of the time on this animal not under control, it's okay. Like I'm not under control a whole lot. I just kind of pick up and regain control here and there in little spots, but most of the time I'm just kind of sitting up there going along with them, especially on a greener one. You know, a first ride on a colt, I'm not in control 98% of the time. I'm just picking up a rein here and there, change direction, and then I give the whole thing right back to them, and we just go a little ways, and then I'll pick up on it again. So kind of people need to see that you don't have to be under control all the time. And that's really some of the funnest rides is when you kind of put your reins down and just see what if this mule could do whatever it wanted to do, what would it really do? Does it want to go to the back to the gate, or is it going to kind of go there and then turn left and go over here? And I didn't have on its mind what I thought it had on its mind. But I don't ever know that unless I'm kind of willing to test that stuff and not be in complete control all the time, you know. So
I love that, man. Because it's like, uh, I see that too, Daniel. And I'll say, what do you think this mule or this horse is gonna do to you? Like, do you think this animal's out to get you? Like, do you think it spends all
mhm.
its spare time thinking about, oh, I can't wait till Daniel gets on. I'm gonna show him. Is that really what you think? You know? And yeah, you're right. I mean, I like to give these equine a lot more thought than that, you know. I mean, they're pretty amazing creatures, and it's sometimes we just we sell them short, you know. We sell them short, I think, a lot of times. So,
Mhm.
hey, so I know I'm kind of hopping around a little bit, but this is something that I want to know too. You know, you know, you had background in the cutting world, and and now you're you know, you're doing a lot of clinics and other things, but what does Daniel like to do? Like when some, you know, people always try to put us in a box, right? Like, what do you do? What kind of riding do you do? Like we have to pick one thing, you know, and I tell people, well, you know, I ride mules, but I trail ride, sure, and I pack a lot, and I cowboy and buckaroo a lot, and I just ride out in my backyard with my kids a lot too. So, um, but what do you do, Daniel? Like, what's your favorite thing to do with your horses?
I really, really like working cattle. Um, you know, just about anything with working cattle. I don't like to do the fast stuff. So like the team pinning or team sorting, that kind of stuff doesn't float my boat too much. But if we've got some cattle to pin and working the pins and that sort of thing, that's almost always a good day. Um, I do enjoy the trail riding and stuff. We don't have the beautiful venues to go over in Louisiana like you have over there. But and then my sons have always ridden with me on that kind of stuff. I don't enjoy. I'm more for solitude, I guess. So when you if you say let's go on a trail ride and what you mean is 90 other people, like no, thank you, I'm good. But if we're talking a group of five, you know, or something like
Yeah.
that, that'll probably be okay. If anybody brings a radio, it's not going to make it back to the campsite with us. I'll just tell you that right now. So I enjoy that kind of stuff a whole lot. I enjoy. I don't know if you have this same kind of feeling or not, but being in the clinician game, I kind of get the feeling sometimes that I'm always like on, like there's always a camera or a microphone or an audience or something and an agenda. And so I don't feel like I get the opportunity much. But man, when I give myself permission, I guess, to not be on and just go play with a horse without
Yeah.
an agenda and not feeling like I have to teach somebody something, I just get to play with a horse. That seems to be rarer and rarer for me these days. But man, it's nice to get back to it, kind of get that little reminder of what this is really all about, you know. Um, so
It's funny you say that. I just started a I just started a 3-year-old mule here. I just put the third ride on her yesterday. By the time this podcast comes out, I'll have a month of riding her, you know, when our listeners hear this. Um but I know exactly what you're saying there. Like just spending time with your mule, you know. My wife asked me, she says, "So do you want to, should we film these sessions and put them on the video library and stuff?" And I'm like, You know, nah. I mean, I got so much content on there, and I know people would love to have it. And I have a lot of students who are like, oh, how come you're not taking videos? Like, well, you know what? I kind of just want to ride. I just kind of want to go ride. And it's not that you don't want people to see something. And it's not like you're doing anything different. It's just like when there's a camera on you, there's this, and I know it's fake pressure. We make it up. We make up our own
Mhm.
pressure, right? It's fake. But nonetheless, I feel it like pressure, like, oh, I need to make something happen. Whereas when you just go out just with your own horse, your own mule, then you just get to be
Oh yeah.
there. That
Nobody
is
would want to
good.
watch that. It would be so boring. Yeah. Just,
Exactly. Well, it's like that mule, like I rode it around. I rode it around maybe 20 minutes, And in that 20 minutes of actual riding, I probably only did something maybe maybe 4 or 5 minutes of the 20, you know. Like the rest of the time, I just sitting on her, petting on her, scratching on her, and she just feeling good. And it was just a nice evening, after a hot day, and it was just nice to be out there, and yeah, I think we all need that. And I tell my students too. Sometimes I preach to them that I preach it to them, Daniel, but I don't practice it so good. Is to be with your equine, undistracted. You know, leave your phone back at the house. Don't worry about stuff. Just go out there and be with them. And I preach it all the time, but I need to do it more. That was kind of nice last night just to go out and put a ride on a colt and not worry about anything. It's
mhm.
important for dang
Yeah.
sure. So all your kids, both your boys and your wife, they like to ride with you quite a bit. You said.
My wife doesn't, but both boys do. In fact, my older son, he's got a job at he goes to Louisiana Tech where I went to, and he's working at the Methodist Children's Home up there. They have it's kind of an orphanage type deal for troubled kids, and they have an equine program, and so he's feeding and teaching lessons and that kind of stuff up there. So I had one of those really cool phone calls with him here a while back. Tied, I don't, you don't have sons, do you? Just daughters?
Just daughters, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little different. He's always got that chip on his shoulder of I don't need you to teach me. I know everything and all of that.
Oh,
And
daughters do that too.
uh, so he actually calls me 4 months ago, 6 months ago, or something like that, and he's got a problem horse, and he has a legit question. Like I've tried. I've been doing this for a month, banging my head against the wall. It's not working. I don't know what to do. How do I fix this? And I was like, oh, I want to savor this. So let me remember where I'm standing. And it's 3:42 in the afternoon. The phone call has finally come. We need Dad's help here. But yeah, I love riding with them and playing with them. Um, kind of do have that. I don't know if you have that with your daughters or not, but I have thought sometimes I'm gonna have to pay someone else how to teach my kids how to ride because that dad-child dynamic is a little different sometimes. I know a bunch of other horse trainers that have had that kind of a thing with their kids too, and I never wanted to push them. It's kind of if you ask me, I'll help you, but I'm not gonna insert myself into it too much unless things are getting dangerous or something like that, and you need to shut this down or whatever. But so yeah,
Yeah,
my
I get
wife
that
doesn't
too.
ride too much, but the boys they're both little monkeys on horses.
That's
So
awesome.
and my youngest one has started coming to a few clinics with me. So he rode in with me one last year for the first time, and so who knows? Maybe he'll wind up taking this thing over in
Yeah, that's
20
fun.
years or something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty fun. I listened to a couple of your episodes where he was on there asking questions and on your show. That was pretty cool. I like that. That was fun. But it's funny that you mentioned that. Maybe you'll take it over in a few years. That's actually one of the questions that people ask my oldest daughter, Ellie, all the time, and she hates it. Because he's like, absolutely not, But they just, so are you gonna do this when you grow up? And she's like, no, like my kids have both grown up pretty much on the road. We've been on the road, 8 or 9 months a year, and so it's funny. Grass is always greener on the other side, right? And for them, they're
Yeah.
like, no way, man, we're out of here. They love to ride and all that, but yeah, they don't want to do what I do. It's I've already burned them out on on this lifestyle. So, hey, speaking of I mentioned your podcast there. You got a man. I love your show, and you've had some incredible guests on. You've had some incredible guests on. Who's your favorite guest so far?
Man, we're gonna have a banger episode come out with this mule guy named Ty Evans
That
here in
yeah,
a
there you
few
go.
weeks too.
That's correct.
Um,
I'm just teasing you, man. I just setting
uh,
you up.
as far as picking a favorite, I don't know. There's probably 6 or 8 that were just just like magical conversations.
Hmm.
There's a Canadian lady named Lee McLean. She's been on there a couple of times, and um, I think we had a really cool moment with her. She is actually a stroke survivor. Keystone Equine is her Facebook page. And so we got to talking about bits a little bit, and I was talking about the importance of swallowing, and I kind of asked her when she was having to relearn that during her stroke, recuperation, and I think a light bulb went off for her on that sort of thing. So that was kind of a cool conversation. I think the conversation you and I had was quite fun as well. I've had a couple of pretty cool ones with Nashawn Cook. If you want to hear like some more controversial arguing, Patrick King and I are like two stepbrothers. So there's a couple of good ones with that where we get a little bit into the ethics. And I think we did one on the Charlotte Dujardin controversy. If you remember that from about a year ago, the whipping of the horse. Someone released a 3-year-old video like a month before the Olympics when she was supposed to go of her with a lunge whip on a
Oh,
horse in
oh yeah.
lesson.
Mm.
Um, so we got into that kind of stuff. So um, I'd say one of the really special ones, I had one with Dr. Robert M. Miller. That was the first year I was doing it. So that's been 4 or 5 years ago. And he's recently passed on.
Yeah.
Um, and that was one of those I honestly I wrapped it up and I turned record off and we talked like another hour and a half. That's the part I really hate is that I didn't record all of it. So I've kind of learned that lesson since. But he was probably the most famous person I had talked to, or at least in terms of my what I consider to be famous people. And he was such a gracious, nice guy. You know, you kind of have that don't meet your heroes because sometimes they're not who you might have wanted them to be. And he delivered in every way. So I really appreciated the time he gave me there. Um,
He's pretty famous in the mule world, you know. The mule world really, especially out to Bishop Mule Days and out to California, you know, he was a big part of that and yeah, a lot of the mule community, you know, really going to miss him. You know, he brought a lot of good stuff to the mule world, like, you know, talking about his imprinting thing with the mules. That was a that was a game changer because so many people treated them like, well, they're just kind of the beast of burden, whatever. We don't need them gentle. We need them tough. You know, work out in those fields and pull something and work. You know, and pack and he kind of came along and said, you guys, if you want to ease your life dealing with these mules, how about you spend a little time when they're babies, you know? And he was a game changer for a lot of the mule community early on. And so we appreciate him. I appreciate him, especially when I was training for the public, Daniel. And I'd get gentler stuff, you know, and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, we raised this mule. I read Dr. Miller's book." I'm like, "Oh, thank goodness you did."
uh-huh.
And you asked me the question when I was on your show, you know, would you rather have them? I can't remember exactly how you phrase it. You'll have to remind me. But basically, would you rather work with something that is a little pushy and you know overly friendly to the point of annoyance, or something that's just you know butt wild? And I usually these days, I guess, with the circumstances I'm in with my family and kids around, I'd kind of rather deal with something a little bit on the too gentle side and tune that up a little bit than have something that's scared to death trying to jump fences right now, you know. And
Yeah.
Robert Miller, he's he's probably responsible for a lot of those overly gentle ones because
Uh-huh.
a lot of people overhandle them as babies, I think. So yeah, he's cool.
That is an interesting dynamic of what imprinting does. I also have a fair bit of experience with birds. So like my grandfather hand raised a bunch of birds and parrots and stuff, and then falconry is one of my hobbies nowadays, and it is amazing the difference that imprinting makes with birds. Like you'll never take a wild caught bird and get them even 25% as gentle as what an imprint will be right from the start. Like you never gain that ground back. And it's it's just eye opening. But it does also, just like with a spoiled mule or horse, a lot of time there are some unwanted things that come along with that gentleness as well that you have to be careful about and so forth. So too much of anything, right?
Yeah, well, you always ask everybody that question, or almost everybody. What is your answer to that? Would you rather work with something that's wild or something that's a little on the pushy and spoiled side? What's your pick today?
So feral or spoiled is how I usually go about
Yeah,
it.
that's your words. That's
My
right.
Yeah, my answer is typically feral. I will say as I get older, I lean more toward the spoiled side, and I think I've only had two or three people that pick spoiled, and you may be you're the youngest of them. I think both of the others would be in the 60 plus range. So I think that kind of, because the spoiled one's the one you got to beat and bang on. Uh, um, but the feral one's the one that's going to beat and bang on you. And so you get to a certain age and you don't want to be beaten banged on anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the whole, how's my body going to feel after a week of this?
No-
Are my reflexes quick enough to keep me from getting pawed or kicked or, you know? And so
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
age
time of
plays into that
life.
a little bit.
Yeah, time of life, and like I said, for me, just the time of my life, like I can't have anything feral around. I got kids around and they bring their cousins over and all the neighbor kids all the time. There's always kids here. And I love it. I love having all these kids around, having a good time with the equine. And so, yeah, I can't really have even our cattle. We got a bunch of roping cattle here. Dude, you can go out and pet them. Go pet every one of those cows. They're just so, and they're Corianis. So we got hot-blooded cattle that are gentle enough to pet on. Okay. Everything just gets gentled here. So, and kids help with that. I tell you that too, because I could, as my girls do get older, having all these kids around, I could probably get away with having something a little more touchy around and they'd get them gentle for me, just by all their they're lady loving on these animals, petting on them all the time. So, yeah, I think if you would have asked me that question 10 years ago, I would have said feral for sure, just because it's, all the basics of horsemanship, works really good with those animals that are just fresh. They're just fresh. One of my favorite things about working with, I got a lot of students that are into the Mustangs, especially out west. Mustangs are a big deal out here, and everybody on the road has a Mustang, it seems like, and um, one big difference I see in them is man, they are not pushy. They are not in your space. They do not run you over. They might run away and jump through the fence, but they're not going to run you over. And so versus I get a lot of mules, and there's just hardly such a thing as a wild mule. I mean, if you got a mule, it's domestic in some way or another. They ain't making wild mules, and when people deal with that, it's a different deal. Most of these mules are so dang gentle. It's a piece of cake. It's just that they're a little pushy. Are you there,
I don't know
Daniel?
that. Yeah, you froze up on me. You have me now?
Yep, I got you now. You're good. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Um, I don't know that I haven't worked with nearly as many mules as you have. I've probably started a few dozen of them, or restarted some of them, and I don't know that any of the ones I've ever gotten in have been what I would call wild. So they have all been kind of on the, you could touch them, halter them. We're not halter breaking and trying to do first halterings, first touchings, picking their feet up and that kind of stuff. I've actually had a few that came from like the carriage mule world, from New Orleans and that kind of stuff. And man, those things are a piece of cake. They got a mouth like a bear trap. That's the only rough part about them, because I guess they've been pulled on so much and their legs are so stiff from on asphalt and stone roads and all that stuff for their whole life. But anyway,
What it let's talk about your horsemanship a little bit. Like, what is your process, and what do you like to do? And being the bit guy, let's kind of lean our conversation a little towards the use of tools and what you do and when you do it. But let's just set up this scenario, Daniel. Let's say this is a horse you've raised. This is your horse. You've raised it all the way through. It's time to start riding. Let's talk about your process and the tools you're using.
Okay. So I'm gonna say the first thing is that I don't handle my babies a ton. I do want them gentle. I can walk out into the pasture and scratch on them and pet on them, but I don't want them to have been in a round pen 80 times already when we decide we're finally going to ride them or anything like that. Like they're gentle enough that I can worm them or trim their feet or whatever, but I still want them to leave some stuff new. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
One of my least favorite scenarios is when an owner brings me a horse and they've already done 4 months of groundwork with him. Because like I need to do some new stuff with this animal. That's part of my evaluation. How did they handle the new thing? How did they go about figuring out what the release was, what the thing was? Do they overreact? Do they underreact? There's a lot of information there for me to get. And it's also part of the process of them getting comfortable with me as their handler. Um, so when someone's already done everything they can think of, that really kind of robs you of something, even if it's me. So I do like for there to be a lot of new left on the table when I'm going to go to start one. Um, I go pretty slow with my own horses. I do give myself permission that I don't have a futurity deadline or anything like that. I don't have to ride them 30 days in a row. I could put a week on them and kick them back out and bring them back up in 2 or 3 weeks. And that is pretty much how it goes for them for the most part. I do throw everything at them. So like, for instance, I don't know if you've ever been very big into laying horses down. I laid everything that I started down for probably 20 years. And then I got away from it. I don't lay near as many down as I used to. But if I own it, I'm gonna lay it down regardless. I did actually have one of mine. He was one of the more unathletic horses that I've ever owned, and he fell in a hole while we were trail riding on a hill, and the sucker went down and wound up on top of me. But I was on the downhill side, so if he was
Oh,
gonna
geez.
roll over to get up, he's coming over me, and and so because I had laid him down and all, I was able to just hold him down and dig my leg out and get out from under him and stand up and then let him get up. And I was like, okay, I'll if I own it, then this isn't happening to me again, right? Like they're all gonna lay down. So I do leading by the feet, ropes, and all that kind of stuff. I do that to everything that comes in to get started too. Um, but I go pretty simple and pretty easy. Probably watching me ride one of my colts is like watching an ADD monkey in a pinball machine. There's nothing that you would call drilling. I just get a little something over here, a little something over there, a little something over there, and then it'll all come around and add up to something. But like I said, if you were watching me and I didn't have an agenda and I wasn't showing people something on purpose, it would be boring, boring, boring. Which I've come to believe is a good thing. I know I used to have some of those opportunities to watch people I'd heard of. You finally get to watch so and so ride and watch them ride, and it's like, well, that was anticlimactic. Like they didn't really do anything, and I get it now. Like some of the
Yeah.
most important stuff that you do is the stuff that you don't do, right?
Yeah. Oh
So
yeah. So when it's time to get on, like I usually do my first ride or two in a halter, and then I'll put a snaffle bit on, after that, and I'm usually in a snaffle, and I'm just talking about a single jointed, you know, uh, like a loose O-ring or a ball hinge snaffle, whatever. Um,
mhm.
for the first usually 2 or 3 years for me, I'm in that. What are you doing? This is your horse still. We're talking about your horse. What are you
Yep.
doing?
So I used to start everything in either like a halter or a side pull or something like that. I haven't really started many in a traditional hackamore. I actually like a side pull quite a bit for that. I would say maybe 10 or 15 years ago, I started starting them in a single jointed snaffle right from the get go. And I would say that that's mostly just because I got good enough where I could get away with it. I understood things well enough, and and if I start them in a halter or side pull, I always felt like, and I guess this is more with the pressure cooker of the public horse on me, but I would get them going pretty well, and then I'm ready to transition them to a snaffle, and I would lose a day or two there, and kind of re-going over all of those things in the snaffle, and so it felt like we stagnated a little bit in that transition for a day or two, and so starting them in the snaffle, I don't have that stagnation, but I'm also not really on an agenda. Um, I would just say it's now something that I'm comfortable with, that I know I can get away with. There's no harm from it the way that I go about it, and so maybe it's a point of pride. I don't know, something like that. But I pretty much start everything just straight in just what you're talking about. And for me, it's always in a single jointed O-ring snaffle. I'm pretty deliberate about that. I've got a bunch of reasons why I'm specific about that stuff. But I don't really do any driving. Um, I do some teaching on how to drive, but honestly, that's been one of those things where I used to start a lot of horses, and I would start horses for other trainers too. So I don't know if you were ever that way, but I probably had three or four trainers. I was like a hub. Their colts came to me for the first couple of weeks, and then would go back to them. And their customer probably never knew that I rode that horse for the first 2 weeks. And one of those guys in particular, he would drive everything before he sent it to me, and man, those horses just had a mouth like a bear trap. Like he took all of the sensitivity out of them. So I really have always had a pretty bad taste in my mouth, so to speak, with driving. So, and I'm kind of a minimalist on the groundwork stuff. I don't do a ton there. I really feel like when I'm in the saddle and I have a leg and a rein on both sides, that's kind of where I can do the most effective communication. Because if I have a halter and a lead and I'm standing on the left side, then there's things I can't do on the right side. But when I'm riding them, I have all of that. So to me, it's the most efficient, cleanest, fastest way to get everything kind of taught to them. And again, I'm not like, I don't make a big deal out of much. So I'm just looking for little subtle things, consistent and efficient, and doesn't really look like I've done a whole lot, and then kind of put it together and they bloom like a flower, hopefully. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. So, you mentioned this a little bit, and I'll say this for all my listeners. You guys, Daniel has some awesome resources, educational resources. He's got videos, all kinds of great stuff. He's got master classes, and definitely check that out. But so I'm not trying to get you to put all your information here, Daniel. But you mentioned there's a few reasons why you use that loose ring, single jointed snaffle. Can you mention a couple of those?
yeah, yeah. So like one we already talked about in that one rein at a time contact, getting lateral flexion, like that's the inroad to helping a horse relax. I actually teach them a cue to relax as well. And so I'm really big on setting up, especially with that young green horse or that problem horse. We're going to very habitually work on them down regulating, processing, releasing tension, showing me all the calming signals. That's as big a part of the foundation as anything else is. The O-ring snaffle, I hang it lower or looser than most people do. So I'm actually looking for it to be about a quarter of an inch below the corner of the mouth. So absolutely no wrinkle. And the reason I do that is that helps to have the animal form the mouth seal. This is one of those concepts I'm kind of learning as I teach. I thought everybody kind of knew and understood about the mouth seal, and I'm learning that that's a lot less known than I realized. So basically, I want the horse to pick the bit up, the mouthpiece, and I want them to suck on it and hold it. And in that position, all of the tissues, the tongue, the hyoid apparatus, the throat, they're all in a state of function, and they're going to swallow. If I have tension introduced into that, then I'm going to wind up in a state of dysfunction, and I may have enough dysfunction that I stop the animal from swallowing. And that's a major problem, a really, really major problem. And so with that O-ring snaffle hung a little bit low, they can very easily pick it up. One of the things that I also try to have people think about, we were talking about the tongue and all of that, and sometimes in that ride, things are good for 30 minutes, and then they go a little south, and we start, their mouths get fatigued just like we might if you were doing a new exercise that you weren't used to. Sit-ups, let's say we're going to do sit-ups, and I show you the proper form and you're on board and you want to do it. That doesn't mean you can do those indefinitely. Like at some point your muscles are fatigued and lactic acid and all the metabolic things show up, and now we're going to have soreness and problems, and your mind's going to go the other way. Pretty soon you're talking bad about me inside your head. And if I keep making you do it, now you're going to talk out loud to me. It's all going to go. And we kind of have that same thing go with a horse. So by having a low hung O-ring, we can ward off fatigue, and they can readjust it. Just like if I were going to, let's say, hand you a square bell tie, and I know you're a young guy in good shape, but you have no trouble carrying a square bell. But what if I made you carry it a mile? You'd probably want to switch from your left hand to your right hand. You'd want the freedom to adjust that thing around, move it to different positions as you got fatigued. And again, with the bit hung a little bit lower, I'm giving the mule or horse the opportunity to do that. And so I really want them to continue to swallow. That's a big part of the processing and the physiological aspects that I need that correlate with the parasympathetic nervous system. And then the single jointed is simply the best tool for the lateral work. So I'm predominantly working left side, right side. I'm not gonna, like, I don't do two reins at the same time on an animal for probably 2 to 3 months. It's pretty much all one rein at a time stuff, keeping them real soft, real lateral, um, and not braced against me. Um, so that's why that, and then I'll take it one step further. I also specifically want sweet iron with copper inlay. Um, and I don't want an alloy. I need two distinctly separate metals on the bit. That is going to have something called galvanization occur, and that bit actually becomes a simple battery in the horse or mule's mouth. And so it will stimulate an electric current. We have a positive and a negative terminal, just like a battery would have, and that will stimulate the animal to salivate, which also stimulates the animal to work their tongue and swallow, which will help again keep them in the parasympathetic nervous system and have them releasing tension, relaxing, processing. They're thoughtful, they're aware. I can teach that animal if I can keep them in that sort of a state of mind. So again, I'm using the bit as a tool. Um, we can use a tool for one thing, or we could be a little more clever about it and we could use a tool and get three things done all at the same time. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do, is just maximize all the benefits that I can with that thing.
I like that. I like that. And that's a great description of using those two metals. I've tried to find the words to explain that myself. So I'm gonna copy you. I'm just gonna steal that from you and use that when I'm trying to, except for that new word, galvanization. I gotta that's a new word for me, Daniel. So thanks for educating me
Well,
today.
have you ever seen like a tin roof?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're using zinc as the gray metal. So it's the sacrificial metal, or the anode, the negative terminal of the battery, and then the tin is the cathode. So you have one metal that is voluntarily corroding in order to protect the other metal. And
Okay.
so in a sweet iron with copper inlay bit, the copper is the cathode, the positive terminal, and the sweet iron is the negative terminal. And so the sweet iron is going to rust. And actually I didn't mention it, but this is another part of the benefit. Because the sweet iron rusts, the bit now has texture and it's easy to hold. So if you thought of something like a barbell, if you're going to work out, a barbell is going to have knurling on it. It's going to have the grip so that you can grip it and hold it, and it's easy to hold. If you took that same barbell and you put axle grease on it, it's now going to be a lot more difficult, a lot more dangerous. So one of the real problems that we have in the bit world is that the consumer wants to buy a shiny object, and the people that sell bits know this, and so they give you highly polished mouthpieces made out of alloys that are specifically chosen so that they don't rust. And then you inadvertently put a greased pig in your horse's mouth. And even if he's trying to form the mouth seal, he's got to wrestle this thing around, and it makes the fatigue happen sooner rather than helping him out and putting it out. So I'll actually take one of those nice shiny mouthpieces. I take some sandpaper to that thing and make it look all kind of ugly, but my horse shines instead of my mouthpiece, and I think that's a little more important. So,
There's an old bridleman out here near me that whenever he'd get a new bit of any kind, he'd go bury it out in his yard for a while. And for to the average person, you say that, you're like, "What the heck are you doing, man? You just spent all that money on that bit to bury it? You bet." But he'll bury it and just until it gets rusted. That's his goal. He says, "I got to get this thing rusty. Leave it out in the rain and out in the dirt, and I got to get this thing rusted here pretty quick." And but it is interesting because I've always here's another thing I want your thoughts on. We're going to bounce around different rabbit hole now, but okay, the whole concept, does my horse or my mule like this bit? And my general thought is, well, if there was a bit sitting out there in the pasture, is your horse going to go over there and pick it up and wear that bit around because they like it so much? Well, probably not. But the point of when we say do they like it or they don't like it, it's okay. How well can they pack this bit and accept this foreign object here? How well are they going to take it and respond to it? That's what I mean. I don't mean that they love it and they chose this bit for their very own. I'm not getting into all that stuff, um, but it does seem like you're talking about the rust. When I'm watching one carry it, when I put a bit on, I just sit and I'm watching them and I'm paying attention over the weeks and months that we ride. They sure pack those rusted bits better. You're right on that texture business, man. But
mhm.
what are your thoughts on that question? Well, does my horse like this or they don't? What do you think about that business?
Let me first say that I don't believe typically that there is kind of this one magic bit for this animal. Okay, so I think that there are, levels of comfort, and I think that there's a it's comfortable enough with this. I also think that there's a process of acclimation that takes place. So like you might hop in your truck and go on an 8 hour drive, and if you get home and you hop in your wife's car, it's gonna feel weird because you're used to your seat in your truck, right? But then if you drove your wife's car for 2 hours, you'd get acclimated to the seat, even though it felt weird at first. And so it's the same kind of thing. If we have this different bit in this horse's mouth or this mule's mouth, they're going to get acclimated to it over time. So I am more looking at it in terms of fit and anatomy. So like one of the most common actual problems we have in terms of bit fit is if the bit's too narrow. It can also be a problem if it's too wide, depending on the type of mouthpiece. But like with something like a single jointed snaffle, too wide is not really going to be a problem. But if you got a spade bit that's too wide, that may well be a problem, because that port can shift off center and so forth. So as long as we have an appropriate bit in terms of fit, it's appropriate for the training stage of the animal, and it's not way too much for the rider, then probably you're okay. So there's kind of like always a range of bits that I think are going to be okay and appropriate for this animal. In terms of likes it, I think probably the rider has more to do with that than the bit does. Like I really look at those things more as combinations of, you or I could probably ride a lot more horses and a lot more of a variation of bits and everything would be okay than some of our customers could. They're going to have something that's maybe a little more protective of the animal, gives the animal a break, isn't as sharp or something like that. When I say sharp, I mean in terms of like subtlety of communication, because some of those bits that amplify, if you're a little too quick with it or something, you go from communicating to scaring. And um, so that's more the way that I look at it. I do think that there are situations where we do come upon a pretty good combination for this animal, but I think that in all the cases I can think of where we really do find this horse's bit, those are always pretty advanced horses. I don't think you find this 2 year old's bit, but you're going to find this 8 year old's bit, and that's probably more their anatomy is such that now the actual comfort in their anatomy matters more. The communication aspects matter less because they've completely mastered that sort of thing at that point. So if that makes sense, I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I like what you said about, when it comes to a horse or a mule, kind of accepting a bit and whatever that means to the person, it is more about how we're using that tool than just that bit itself,
Hmm.
and because a lot of people stress about that. Well, it just seems like my mule doesn't like this bit, and I'm like, well, like in the snaffle bit, for example, you know, rein angles are a real thing, and they're important. Like how you draw on that rein, how you pick up on that rein, or pull on that rein, or put the rein here or there. That makes a total difference in the signal that they're receiving down there in the mouth. And so if somebody's trying to get their mule to turn right, and they're pulling back and to the right, yet their objective is to go forward and to the right. Well, we have a contradiction of angle here. Like it, you know, you're blocking them. Well, no wonder they got a mouth that's gaping open and they're dropping their shoulder out, and you got all those issues. Pick up your rein, and you're trying to go forward and to the right. Take your rein forward and to the right. Give them that. We talk a lot about the leading rein and getting them to follow a leading rein, and the objective is to follow that signal of that leading rein, and so yeah, I see that a lot where somebody will have an issue and they like, well, I just think they don't like this bit. And it very well could be the case that they're having issues with it, but a lot of times it's on us. It's on us. I like to take that ownership. Hey, it's on me. The first thing I do if I'm having a problem is I look at myself. What am I doing wrong here? All right, and it's usually something to do with either my rein use, my seat position, my leg positions, the timing, the draw, all these businesses that have to do with the guy in the mirror. So,
Yeah, roughly 3/4 of the time when people come to me with air quote bit problems, we don't actually change the bit. We change how they're handling the bit. Um, One thing I was doing a few years ago, I don't know if you do this or not, Ty, but um, I was doing some virtual coaching, and this was pre-COVID, so all this Zoom stuff wasn't nearly as handy as what it is right now. So at that point, I would have people just send me in a video that they took that might be 20 minutes long, and I would put it in a video editor. And one of the things I would often do is slow it down. So we may take it down to like 1/4 speed or something. And when I started doing that, you would be shocked at the number of animals that all of a sudden I would see a micro flinch every time the person picked the rein up, like they'd close their eyes and their face just would go, "Oh no," you know. And I started seeing that in the slow motion, and then I started seeing it in real time, just like watching sports or something. You first start watching hockey and you can't see the puck, and then when you've watched enough hockey, you can see the puck, right? So now I see the micro flinches all over the place. So most of the time, if your horse is or mule is not comfortable with your bit, it's probably more your hands than it is the bit. As long as the fit is good and it is an appropriate bit for the training stage that they're in, then the next most common culprit is the other end of the reins.
this I was telling you about that colt I just started, and she's not particularly like going to be the lightest, most sensitive mule. She's just going to be a pretty quiet, pretty gentle mule, right? This is not going to be a mule I'm going to go win a cutting on. Let's just say that. All right. And I could see, like riding her last night, for example, I could see how somebody with just poor timing, they could have their rein angle good, they could have their seat position good, legs good, bit good, tack, I mean, everything good, good, good. But if they were off on their timing, I could see how they would totally have conflict because this mule's just not particularly sensitive to following that feel yet. So, I was very particular as that mule. Like if I wanted to go forward and to the right, for example, as that right front foot come off the ground, or as it was coming off the ground rather, that's when I would direct and pick up on that rein. And it was working out pretty good for me. But just the feel of her, I could see that if your timing was off when that leading foot was hitting the ground or coming down, you would think that mule was the heaviest thing in the world, and you'd think, oh geez, this bit, what a piece of junk. you know,
Hmm.
you could totally throw some different blames out there when really it was just my timing of the deal. That's all that makes the difference right there. I see that a lot.
I've started incorporating that into every clinic, the feel of the feet stuff, and I do warn the people, like, I'm going to show you the start of this road. This is difficult. This is something most people can't do. Even a lot of professional trainers don't feel the feet the way that I'm about to show you. And so there's a good chance that 6 months down the road, you're going to wind up crying in the shower in the fetal position. So just know that day's coming. But you're probably about to have a breakthrough right after that. So it'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Right after the frustration is when it gets good. So just hang in there for the ride. Yeah. No kidding, man. So, hey, there's a couple other things I wanted to ask you before we run out of time. And one of those things was to talk about some of your mentors. I always like to give my mentors credit. I got some great mentors, and you know a lot of them, and we've talked about it before. And I got a lot of respect for these guys that come before me, and have taught me. Who are some of your mentors and people that have helped you down this road of horsemanship?
So are we speaking about actual live people, or like books and things like that
A-
that we?
Anything, whatever's contributed to
Okay.
I guess whatever you'd like to give credit to. There's always those greats that come before us.
So, without question, the most influential trainer that I ever apprenticed under is a guy named Mark Cooey. He was a cutting horse trainer, and he also had a side to his business that was just colts and problem horses. So that was predominant. I didn't really work too many cows with him, but he put a whole bunch of colts underneath me and let me start them. And I'm sure if I could look back on what he was having to deal with the first year or two of that, he was probably very gracious in not firing me and letting me stay there long enough to figure some stuff out. But I did figure a whole lot of stuff out about starting colts while I was working for him, and I'm not a person that takes micromanagement very well. So the way he was kind of hands off, I could always go to him and ask questions, and he'd give me a straight answer. But he wasn't like breathing down my neck on everything. He was confident enough to know he could fix whatever I was going to mess up. So it was okay if I messed up. I kind of had the freedom to do that. If it got too bad, he did take a few of them away from me over the years. Like, all right, this is you're not ready for this one. This is not going to work out. I'm gonna have to fix this before this gets too bad. But so I have to give Mark a lot of credit uh, for that. Um, Another guy that I learned a lot from is actually a good friend of Mark's. He's another cutting horse trailer, a guy named Alan Crouch. Alan is one of those guys, like, you could be around him for a few years and you might not have heard him say but a few words in that period of time. Like, he's not a talk a whole lot kind of a guy, and I feel like it took a long time for me to get to know him enough where he would talk with me. But man, when he started talking, I realized all those times he was being quiet, like that hamster wheel was turning upstairs. That guy was thinking about stuff, and so he was a true master at not. You didn't have to have a head-on confrontation with the horse. He was going to think his way around that, come at it from a different angle, and really kind of, especially at that point, I'm 24 or something like that, and I'm all about blunt object against the hard wall until I break the wall, right? So I needed some guidance on not doing that anymore. And so another guy I worked for was named Steve McCain. I worked for him for about a year. I would credit Steve a lot with teaching me about cattle. That was actually kind of one of those pretty frustrating jobs. Mark was pretty mechanical, so I learned a lot about how to put a handle on a horse and some things there. And Steve was a straight cowboy, and so when I went to work for Steve the first little bit there, I wasn't sure I had made a huge mistake. because I learned pretty quick there were things I could do with a horse that he couldn't, and that was uh, that was confronting. You know what I mean? Like, am I really working for someone that's going to advance my career, or have I just put my hat in the wrong basket here? Um, but he was really good about using a cow to train the horse, and he was also probably I learned a lot from him about taking pressure off of the horse. I was not when I was in my early 20s. I kind of felt like it was limitless the amount of pressure I could put. I was just gonna tweak until they gave, you know. So Steve taught me a whole lot more about not blowing them up, and you know, this could wait a week. You don't have to solve this afternoon. Like, you can just keep kind of pecking at it. It'll be okay, and happen down the road. I would also say I've done a lot of reading. So I almost had the opportunity to ride with Ray Hunt, but that wound up not happening. But I've certainly read his books. I know a lot of people that he knew, and kind of, I feel the influence of him and the Dorrance brothers in my world quite a bit. I feel like we sort of stand on their shoulders. Dr. Robert M. Miller, I feel kind of the same way um, towards that, a little more thoughtful approach. Um, I am on. There's a little bit of a disagreement I have with some of the popular things that get said. Like, I don't think it's always been a terrible world for horses and mules. I think there have been excellent horsemen all along. I think there's always going to be naturally gifted horsemen that kind of understand it, and I think there's always going to be people that never will. And it's just more a question of who's getting the publicity at the time, you know. So I don't know that we have had like this golden age. You know, I think in the 1920s there were some very fine horsemen out there too, right? Like, I don't think it took until the 70s or 80s for people to start getting good at this. But uh, so true horsemanship through feel, true unity. All of those books I thought were excellent books. I have read some classical masters. I haven't done that in a long time, so no titles are coming to mind. But like Boucher, later Boucher, I think is pretty good. There is some bit stuff that I take from him. There's also some stuff where I think some of the modern world, like the dressage world, has read or maybe not read. Maybe they've been told what he wrote, and then they took some left-hand turns off of it and went in the wrong direction with it, and are in a little bit of a dead end road at this point in time. But I think there's some really good stuff in what he wrote. Um, so anyway, that's some of it. Anyway,
Yeah. Well, those are
I
awesome. That's awesome, man. It's great.
yeah, I would. I mean, in all honesty, the most influential thing on me has been the horse. Like, if you read the horse, they pretty well show you the path. So I
Mhm.
think hands down, I've learned more from them than I have from any person. But um, anyway, there are definitely some times where some people can save you a whole lot of time. I do kind of wonder about that sometimes. I don't know if you do, but was there somebody that came up to me when I was 22 and told me what I needed to know, and I was just too dumb or too young or whatever to listen and recognize it, and I've just missed that whole opportunity, or maybe that happened 100 times. Who knows? But anyway,
Yeah. Oh man, I can relate to that. I remember I was a teenager. I was training, under my dad, training horses and mules for the public, working for my dad and stuff. And somebody came along and give me Brad Cameron's VHS tapes, training mules and stuff. And I watched them and I thought they were awesome. I really did. But as a kid, I thought, my gosh, he sure takes a long time. Like, all these things sure take a long time. And I remember somebody else came along and said, "Hey, you heard of Brad Cameron? He's a good mule guy, and what do you think of his stuff?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, he's a pretty good hand. He's got his mules doing pretty good, but man, he sure takes a long time, and now I'm that guy. In fact, I probably take more time than Brad did, and but yeah, you just don't know what you don't know. But yeah, I think we can only learn what we're ready to learn. You know, hanging out with you, talking bits and stuff like this. I appreciate this, but there's been more knowledge to me gained from trying all these gimmicks and gadgets myself. Like when I was training
Mhm.
for the public, man, I've used so many of these bits that we talk about that, I've used them, and that's why I get either a poor taste or a, kind of get maybe an attitude sometimes towards them and throw that emotion in there, which I shouldn't do, like we talked about earlier. But when somebody comes along with a piece of equipment and I know it's not going to work for them, and I tell them, and then they want to try to sell me the bit, I was like, hold on. The truth is, I know this because I use the same bit, man. I've been there.
Mhm.
you know so a good chunk of my mentorship has come from my own mistakes. That's for dang sure. uh Man, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm sure I'm going to make more of them. That's for sure.
Yeah. Don't feel alone on that. I have done more experimenting and stuff like that than there's a lot of stuff that I've purposefully experimented with. So like you mentioned about that uh, combination bridle earlier and the pole pressure and all of that stuff. One of the things that I teach is that pole pressure of the 7 pressure points, it's the most marginal of all of them. And I know that because I cut a bunch of bridles up and I changed the surface area on the part of the brow band, or not the brow band, but the strap that goes over the pole, and I changed that dramatically across the widths of different headstalls, and then I would throw that on 10 horses and go ride them and see if I could see any difference. And so, in terms of the like pressure points that make a difference, really the only time pole pressure on a bridle makes any difference is if you have a horse with an injured pole. So if you're seeing pole pressure changes, that's actually a red flag that there's soreness and inflammation in that area. But other than that, it doesn't like there are, 10 variables we could change up that would make a greater difference than that one would. So I'm huge on experimentation. One of the things when I did the original bit video, I wanted some collaborators to come in because why would you just take some horse trainer's word on bit stuff? So I had two actual engineers come in and vet all of the information, and one of them I knew pretty well. He was another dad in Boy Scouts. I used to be heavily involved in Boy Scouts, and he didn't believe one of my deals that I was saying. He's like, I don't think it works like that. He made me build a model. And so I had to build a model and actually do an experiment. It's like a college professor kind of a thing. He made me prove my theory and test it, and boom. And then he was like, okay, yeah, it does work like that. That's fine. So I'm in no way above experimenting. I love that kind of stuff. I don't know near as much of it anymore, I guess, probably because I kind of can spot oh yeah, that's not gonna I'm not gonna waste my time trying that out now. But there was a time I would put just about anything on a horse and go try it out. So.
Yeah. Yeah, we got to learn. Somebody's got to go learn. And then, I always tell my students, hey, I'm here to save you time. I'm here to
Yeah.
save you some time. And, we can, and what you're doing, Daniel, you're helping a lot of people save a heck of a lot of time. And, you got so much good information out there. So, anyways, my friend, I like to finish up each of my episodes by asking you to give a word of advice to our listeners today. This could be life advice, horsemanship advice. It could be uh, faith advice. I mean, it could be anything, man. To our listeners going down this road of life today, Daniel, what would you like to say to them?
I think probably the best consistent theme that I try to keep with, and when I don't keep with it, I have problems, is to remember to look at the forest and not the tree. So I always try to zoom out. A lot of times when we get into trouble, it could be with riding our horse or life problems. We get that emotional thing that kicks in and takes over, and our brain kind of shuts off, and we start reacting, or we get mad, or whatever. And and if you could just remember this is just the tree and back out and look at the whole forest, and this will pass and it'll be okay. And uh, I think kind of in all aspects of life, if we could keep that in the forefront of our mind, especially in the times when it's hardest to keep in, that's the thing, is remembering that when you are micro, you're staring too hard at the trunk of the single tree, zoom out, look at the forest it's all going to be okay.
I like it, man. I like it. I thought you was gonna give me something sarcastic, like don't sweat the petty things and don't pet the sweaty things or something like that. But you went all serious on me, and that's a great word of advice.
I try to be on better behavior when I'm on other people's podcasts. So.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you this, except for we got on so last minute. I appreciate you. I texted Daniel yesterday, said, "Hey man, you want to come on my show?" He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And so here we are. But I should have gave you time to write me up a sponsor, for this
Oh,
podcast. I should have had you write me one up. If you guys listen to Daniel's podcast, the best part, I mean, your guests are all right. They're all right, but the best part is the sponsorship ads. So I'm not going to spoil any of them. You got to go listen to Adult Onset Horsemanship, and at least for the sponsors, the information's it's good. It's good, right, Daniel? But the sponsors, that's where it's at. So, anyways,
podcasts are weird because it's like you tell a joke, but nobody laughs. That doesn't come out until a month later and all.
hmm
And so there was a time when I was considering doing away with that. I thought maybe it was too not professional, not serious enough or whatever. And then I start getting people making comments on social media that are like inside jokes from the sponsors and all. I'm like, okay, it's hitting. I'm not hearing it, but I don't need to do away with that. So I appreciate your acknowledgement there because that is one of those things I have questioned whether I was on the right path or the wrong one with. So
oh yeah, I love it. I love it. It's one of my favorite things. I'm like, okay, when's he gonna do a sponsorship? Yeah, let's get to it. Let's get to it. So, anyways, well, Daniel, thank you. I have to thank my sponsors. And they're real too. These are some real sponsors. Okay, so I better say thanks to them because they make this podcast for everybody available. We got Western Mule Magazine. Big thanks to them. Mules and More Magazine as well. Roman Home Tents, Diamond W Enterprises, and Colt Saddlery. Big thanks to all those guys that make this podcast free for you guys to listen to. If you guys are out there listening, we'd love a review. Love to hear from you. Let us know what you think. Daniel, where can they find more information about what you do? We got dauphinhorsemanship.com. Where else can they go?
we also on the bit stuff specifically, we have our own website dedicated just to that. So that is thebitcourse.com. And through that, get on the newsletter, and we have webinars and things that are all kind of bit specific. And we do have 2 online courses, a self-guided course and then the masterclass course that you mentioned. The masterclass course has the ability to test afterwards and become certified. But that is a pretty big undertaking. It's about 40 hours worth of content to go through it once. It's not superficial or cursory. It's a deep dive into all things bits. And the self-guided course is an abbreviated version of the same course. It's only about 15 hours, but it doesn't have the live master classes with me and all. So
Awesome. Yeah, you guys take advantage of that. He's got some awesome stuff, some cool stuff. So we appreciate you, Daniel, and all you guys listening out there. God bless you, and we'll see you down the road.